Hey friends, I'm Father Justin Mathews, Executive Director of Reconciliation Services here in Kansas City, here with my new hiking partner, Dr. Paul Chan. Welcome, Dr. Paul Chan.
Thanks, Father Justin. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
I'm so excited. You and I just completed, I'm telling you, it was the hardest physical feat I've ever done in my entire life. That's not hyperbole, that's for real. You and I just completed 50 miles in the Grand Canyon in just over 24 hours in your 11th annual Hike Against Hunger. Tell everybody listening what you just drugged me through. What did we just do?
Well, we've been doing this for the last decade, as you know, Father Justin, and we wanted to capture the imagination of people to support us in our efforts to fight against hunger, both in Kansas City and throughout the United States. And so we start out on the top of the south rim of the Grand Canyon and descend 10 miles, about 4,500 feet in elevation, to the bottom, and then head up to the other side to the north rim, and that's 15 miles up and an elevation change of about 6,000 feet up. After we complete that 10 and 15 miles, we turn around and head right back down and go down the 15 miles and the 6,000 feet, only to realize we have to go back up 10 miles to the south rim after completing 40 miles to fulfill the 50 miles. In total, we climb about 10,400 feet in elevation, and we descend 10,400 feet in total, all with the hopes of doing that without really stopping except for breaks and trying to complete that within about a 24, 25-hour loop.
Well, I'm telling you, it is literally the hardest thing I've ever done. And the fact that you've done it now for over 10 years in a row, you're a new superhero to me because it was amazing. I would love to do it again. I'm sort of a glutton for punishment. I still want to do it again, but it was amazing. I mean, the thing that I think really took it to the top for me, though, was in the midst of this real difficult endeavor that you were leading with a big group of us, including my wife Jody and your wife and many others. Some people did the 25-mile version. Some of us did the 50-mile version. I couldn't help but think about how small our suffering in that 24-hour period actually was when thinking about the suffering of our neighbors right now. Just here in Kansas City, for example, the new statistic is 1 out of 7 people in Jackson County alone are suffering from food insecurity. They don't know where they're going to get their next meal. And COVID, the pandemic, the environmental and economic situation that we're in right now as a result has everything to do with that. And I know you are hiking with a lot of people from all over the world in your heart too. Who are you carrying with you when you were hiking, Dr. Chan?
Yeah, we have gotten to know a lot of communities over the last decade in this effort. I've been working with people in Central America and in particular in Guatemala within the Mayan indigenous communities in the highlands. We've spent time in Vietnam with communities that are minority communities, whether they are Laotian or Burmese refugees as well in that area in Southeastern Asia. And one of the things that's really poignant about the fact that when we hiked, not only were we hurting in our joints or our feet, some of us were having difficulties with hunger, but not wanting to eat. And as you may share, for 30 miles, we didn't have access to water, potable, clean water that a lot of people in the world do not have access to. And it gave us just a small glimpse as to the daily struggles of a lot of the people in both the Kansas City and in the global community.
Yeah, and not having access to water was also not part of the plan. I mean, we knew that because of COVID, some of the water stations were going to be closed, but we didn't know that you were going to make it all the way up to the North Rim and not have any water along the way. And I personally was nursing, kind of dangerously, 1 liter left that needed to be really rationed up that whole way. And you had no choice. You were that far in, you had to hike your way through. And I think we take a lot of those things like access to quality food, access to water. We take those things for granted. And on top of that, access to shelter, because gosh, what were we at? Phantom Ranch was probably 20 25, let's see, 30 miles in. I'm not sure exactly how far in. You could probably tell me when we passed it and then came back to it. But it just started to rain and sleet and then snow, and for a total of almost 4 hours. And then there were gusts of wind, 40 to 50 miles an hour. And we're walking on this, 3.5, 4 foot wide path. I mean, it was treacherous. What stood out to you from that whole experience?
A few things were particularly notable this year compared to prior years. We've never had the extremes in weather that we had this year. We've had it very cold, or we've had it very hot, but we've never had all four seasons in a 24-hour period. And it just brought back to my consciousness that the canyon is a grandiose place, but it's also a place that we need to fear in its own way, that people do die in the canyon every year. On average, 15 to 25 people die either hiking in the Grand Canyon or falling off the top. And the respect that we need to have for this beautiful God-given place was brought back to central thinking during that hike, especially as we struggled with the elements, as you mentioned, not only the cold and 20 to 30 mile per hour winds, the snow, but also the potential risks that it can pose to people hiking. But the grandiosity of the canyon, the depth of the canyon, really symbolizes a lot of the challenges that the people in our communities have to overcome just to have food security, housing security, and just to have a fighting chance for a good, dignified life. And it's the same way overseas for people who live in rural communities in third world or resource poor countries, especially if they are minority communities or ethnic tribes within their own countries that have to deal with racism, and as we do here in the Kansas City area. Right. Another thing that was really poignant is that the organization that oversees these walks throughout the nation is Church World Service. It's a non-denominational Protestant organization that there's no mission work, but really the works of charity, if you will. But the other arm of Church World Service is refugee and resettlement work. They work with displaced people throughout the world. And the difficulties that we had in our walk, again, was just a small taste of what refugees and displaced people have to go through as they leave their homes and oftentimes to flee violence. So they not only have to worry about the physical problems that they encounter walking hundreds of miles, oftentimes in very short periods of time, but also danger of rape and death and other types of persecution.
I think you make a wonderful point, and there's two things that came to mind for me that are similar. One, they both center on the word suffering, because on the one hand, even though my suffering on the trip, I mean, I think I had literally 5 blisters on each foot, and my knee was swollen. My other knee was swelling. I had more ibuprofen in me than I think a hospital should give in order just to make it out. But the reality in that suffering for me was that I couldn't think. And I was trying really hard. It's 50 miles. You got a lot of time in your head. And I was trying really hard to think, to pray, to work through some things that I had hoped to work through. But I couldn't think about anything but one foot in front of the other. And it really reminded me of our neighbors who are struggling to survive and succeed, and how hard it is to just make those basic daily decisions when you're suffering, and especially physically in pain or suffering from trauma. The second thing, though, that came to me was that co-suffering makes the suffering bearable. That when you and I and the others in the group were suffering together, we weren't saying much, particularly on that last ascent back up to the South Rim at the end of the 50 miles, but we were in it together. And that suffering that we were going through together wasn't reduced, but it was made bearable. And so often what people really need and want is not someone to take away their suffering. That's not what charity is about only, but it's actually to enter into the suffering with someone and to co-suffer with them. And that thereby the suffering gets transformed. And, you know, I think, Dr. Chan, there were a lot of people that entered into the suffering with us. You may or may not have been on the hike, but I know that we had hundreds of people that really gave generously. And in fact, how much did you all raise this year just in your fundraising efforts, Dr. Chan?
I think at the last count it was 169,000 plus. So we overachieved, and we're really indebted to the generosity of people. I think people were looking for a way to give, given the suffering that they've seen in their communities, whether it's with the police violence, whether it's with COVID-19, whether they've lost loved ones or know people who have suffered from the pandemic. And I think that we offered potentially an avenue for them to be engaged. But we're deeply touched by the generosity.
Yeah. And to add to that, you know, our organization was one of 3 locally here in Kansas City that received a gift from that larger aggregate that went to many, many places. And again, congratulations. If I'm not mistaken, you all have raised now over the course of the decade, or a little more than a decade, over $1 million. Is that right?
We have, yeah, no, it's been tremendous, and we never foresaw this to be more than a 1-year hike when we first started. But I think after the first year, people kept asking, when are you doing the hike again? We want to support the efforts. And we realized quickly that we were building a sense of togetherness and a community that we had not anticipated. People want to be involved. People want to give in different ways. And so we've been encouraged on many levels over the years.
Congratulations. And again, thank you to everyone who gave. And I'll add to that, because we took the $5,000 that Reconciliation Services was given by the generous group that is supporting you. And then we were able to match that. But actually, we were able, thanks to the generosity of the Reconciliation Services donors, to go well beyond that. As of right now, which is the 11th of November at almost 4 o'clock, we've raised $13,316. And it's just an astounding outpouring of generosity. And for us, all of that is going to be used to fuel the social and trauma therapy and hunger relief services here at Reconciliation Services in Kansas City at the corner of 31st and Troost. So, Dr. Chan, I am so grateful to, first of all, to have gotten a hike with you. It was inspiring. You hike at a speed that I will never achieve. You're very fast. But you hike with humility, though, and you hike with purpose. And it gave me a renewed sense of purpose and taught me humility in doing it with you. And so I'm really grateful personally, and on behalf of all of our donors, all of our neighbors, our clients, especially who are receiving services here. Thank you for your generosity, and thank you for the generosity of all of those who support your hike against hunger every year.
Well, thank you, Father Justin. And of course, it goes without saying that our work is not successful without the work of folks at Reconciliation Services and other organizations in the Kansas City area that inspire us to be active, to get off the sidelines and to take whatever small actions we can to make this world a better place than when we left it.
Thank you, Dr. Chan. And if anybody out there listening wants to continue to give, you can go to rs3101.org/donate. We're leaving the campaign open. It's actually a part of our larger annual campaign that we're raising this year to try to really meet the needs of those that are struggling. We still have a ways to go. And if you'd like to continue to give and magnify this Hike Against Hunger gift, you can go do that online today. So, Dr. Chan, thank you again. And I look forward to hiking with you, I hope next year. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Father Justin. You take care.
You too.